This is some of the technology I'm trying to learn in 2023. The way that this video is going to work is I'm going to start off with the technologies that I used in the beginning of 2022, and then I'll go over how that started to progress and change and what I ended up using at the end of 2022, and then I'm going to end it off with the technologies that I'm going to be trying to learn in 2023. In the beginning of 2022, my go-to tech stack was using React.js in the front end, compiled into a static bundle, and then on the back end, I had a Node server that I was using Express to route all the API calls, and I used Firebase as my database, and I hosted everything within Google Cloud Run. As 2022 started to progress, I started changing my tech stack a little bit. The very first thing that I switched was what client library that I was using. Earlier, I mentioned that I was using React.js and doing all client-side routing using React Router. I started learning a bit more about server-side rendering and some of the benefits that server-side rendering provides, and that's how I ended up on NextJS. In my NextJS application, I still use React, but now I no longer use any client-side routing with React Router, and instead I rely on Next.js's routing system. I also use style components as my main way of styling all of my components, but I still found it really hard to make really good-looking components, primarily because I'm not a designer. And then I started hearing about Tailwind and how good it was. For those of you that don't know, Tailwind is a way of applying CSS styling by applying class names that have these predefined styles, and then these class names compile into normal CSS and apply style. If you have more questions about Tailwind versus style components, I actually have an entire video where I compare the two right here. Tailwind had a pretty big learning curve in the beginning. I was not used to it because I had to memorize a lot of class names that I just didn't know off the top of my head. I was pretty annoyed by it in the beginning, but I started getting the hang of it, and at this point, I still use Tailwind at the end of 22, and I don't see myself going back to style components or using any type of vanilla CSS styling like Sass anytime soon. I also purchased Tailwind UI, which is actually a whole front-end library that Tailwind creates that have these predefined components and even full-blown website templates that you can just copy and paste. And this is one of the best investments that I made the past year. Tailwind UI makes it so much faster for me to create beautiful front-end components. Well, maybe not beautiful, but like just not ugly, because I can just copy and paste all of the different types of components that I'm looking for. It lets me focus less on the design and instead focus more on the engineering and building. Rather than having everything hosted on Google Cloud Run, I actually host everything on Vercel, which is also a very natural choice for anybody that's using Next.js because Vercel was created by the same creators of Next.js. And I gotta say, I absolutely love Vercel. It makes deploying my code super easy, and I love not having to worry about any of that because Vercel handles all the deployment for me. Those are the three big changes that I made on the front end. I transitioned to using Next.js, and I hosted everything on Vercel, and I used Tailwind CSS for all of my styling. In terms of the backend, I mentioned I was using a Node Express server and then using Firebase for my database. But then by the end of 2022, I transitioned from Firebase into Supabase, which is pretty funny because Supabase advertises itself as the open source Firebase. I actually made another video comparing Firebase and Supabase, which you can see right there if you want. And to this day, I still use Supabase. It's definitely not a perfect product. I think their biggest weakness is in terms of their documentation, whereas Firebase has incredible documentation. But I've gone to a point in my workflow where Supabase works pretty seamlessly for me, and I don't really have any complaints. The Supabase community is super active, and I get a lot of help super quickly. They're super active on Twitter, and their Discord server is also super useful. And then in terms of how I actually host my server, which I mentioned was previously hosted on a Node Express server on Google Cloud Run, I just use the built-in Next.js API routes that's hosted on Vercel. So pretty much my entire stack is hosted on Vercel and Supabase. Now looking forward into 2023, there are four main technologies that I am looking to learn. Number one is GraphQL. I actually use GraphQL in my day-to-day job, but I want to start incorporating it into my personal tech stack for any personal projects that I build. I do know that Next.js does support GraphQL API endpoints, but I also know that Apollo is, I think, the most popular GraphQL provider. Who knows? I'm going to figure it out. Let me know if you have any recommendations on the pros and cons for each one. Number two is TRPC. I used to use gRPC on my team when I used to work at Google, and I thought it was really nice having these protobus being the source of truth between the client and the server, and I have wanted to find a way to incorporate that into my existing workflow. I heard about TRPC, I have a couple of friends that are using it, and I want to try it out and see if I could incorporate it into my own workflow as well. Next up is Remix. Remix is another popular front-end framework that recently got acquired by Shopify, so it's kind of like how Facebook has React, Google has Angular, now Shopify has Remix. I've used Angular back when I used to work at Google, and right now I use React at my current job and also in my personal projects. And even though I'm really happy using React and I actually don't really want to switch, I do want to try Remix out just to get a little familiar with it, see the pros and cons of it. Lastly, I want to learn React Native. Earlier this year, I built my very first mobile application, and I built it on iOS using Swift, which is really great for iPhone users, but not so great for Android users because I was not able to get Android users to try out my application. I know people will say that React Native is a little bit less performant compared to Swift, but I don't care. If I do build a mobile application, I want to build one that anyone can use, and I don't want to be restricted to just one platform at a time. So I'm hoping to learn React Native this year. Maybe I can build another mobile application. I have a few ideas in my head that I do want to try out, so we'll see how that goes. What technologies are you trying to learn in this new year? Let me know in the comments down below. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.